What is up, guys? It is an early morning on the West Coast NFL strategy show, but there is one thing in life I would wake up for, and that is some sponsor content for SuperDraft, the site you should be playing on. We'll tell you more about some of their big deals and promotions going on for the big game, as they like to call it, a special name they came up with for Sunday. I'm Chris Spags, joined once again by the man you're going to want to walk you through the finer points of SuperDraft and some of the big prize pools they have up top, as well as the rest of Sunday's big game. He's Alex Baker, better known as Awesemo. How are you doing, Alex?
Doing good, man. I've been playing a lot more in SuperDraft ever since they got the Caesars money, and man, I've been having some luck over there. So I'm excited about these Super Bowl contests, and they got some really big ones like this $4,000 entry that has 300K to first. Probably if you're watching this, like not many people are going to enter that, but there's some other good ones too, like a couple 20Ks to first. You can definitely throw it down on SuperDraft.
Yeah, they have some 20K to first $4 entries over at superdraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft in the App Store. And the main thing with SuperDraft, let's hit it up top. As Alex mentioned, they have a new partnership with Caesars Rewards that's going to transform the DFS industry forever. And it starts with the big game on Sunday where their prize pools are over $1.3 million and counting. The chance has been never better for you to make money on a DFS site, low rake, high stakes contests as well. And they're going to be having a lot of overlays as SuperDraft grows. Really, the main thing they're trying to do over there is get you guys in the door. So use the promo code Awesemo21. They'll deposit match $50 if you deposit $50 on there immediately with that promo code Awesemo21. So put that in when you sign up at superdraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft in the App Store. We also have a big giveaway coming up later today, which you guys are getting to hear about first, but we have another SuperDraft sponsored show for NBA Live Before Lock. It'll be me and Terry later today. And apparently we're giving away 100,000 Caesars Rewards credits to one lucky winner. It's a $1,000 value. So tune in there, find out how to win, and pay attention because SuperDraft is going to be doing a lot of stuff with us as they make their entry into the big three. And Alex, right away, let's talk about SuperDraft generally. We're going to talk about the games as well, more specifically, but let's talk about kind of the format here because we were discussing before the show. It's sort of similar to the DK showdown format where you are getting a multiplier for a captain spot, but also you're still getting the regular SuperDraft multiplier on top of that. So how does that change the picture for you, Alex? Does it change the correlations and all of that, the things that we've known and really taken to heart over DK showdowns over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot different because you can pick any players like in combination with one another. And I mean, the multiplier kind of does all the work on the back end. So it kind of levels the playing field for who the best plays are. But because football has so many correlations, like being able to access like every single combination of players makes it a totally different game where if you're going to make a Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill stack on another site, like it's probably pretty impossible to make that work with the salary cap. But here on SuperDraft, I mean, you could do it. You're just not getting as many points when each of them scores. So it's an interesting trade-off.
So then is that sort of changed things? Because I think the one thing that we've seen a lot of the showdown experts talk about and something that we've sort of beaten down. And yeah, we're going to go very general here to start, get more specific as we go. And make sure you guys hit the like button too to A, support SuperDraft, and B, support us doing this show here. And hopefully giving you guys a little bit of an edge on the site that people really are going to be easy for you to find an edge as long as you're paying attention on it. So go to superdraft.io or download SuperDraft in the App Store. But are we looking at a different sort of construction here where, for DraftKings, I think a lot of the philosophy there has been historically to put a wide receiver, put a tight end, put at least a pass catcher at captain, and then sort of, let that rising tide go and then get your correlations right with the rest of it where you're probably playing your QB there. You're not getting too many pass catchers in the mix. I'm just wondering overall, is this something where you're looking at it completely differently for SuperDraft because of the multiplier and the fact that, I'm trying to think who would get a jump, but I think the lesser receivers get an even bigger jump, but sort of the mid tier of guys where you're getting a Mike Evans at a 2.35x multiplier at captain, or the CHP spot for them. Chris Godwin at 2.45x. Like, are you then grading these guys a little bit more where it's not equal footing for any pass catcher? It's more, if this guy has a multiplier, then you're more inclined to get there?
Definitely. I mean, a huge thing in fantasy is the upside. So we talk a lot about how like lower tier players, like it's hard for them to score 30 points in a normal fantasy scoring system. But then you throw in Sammy Watkins at 2.4 times the number of points. That means you're getting 14 8.5 points per touchdown. Like, so comparing that to Kelsey, who's 1.3x, that is 7.8 points per touchdown. So you're getting almost twice as many points when the touchdown happens. I mean, the chance that Watkins scores that touchdown are a lot lower, but if you pick him that day, he has a pretty good chance of being the highest scorer on the slate.
So then how low are we willing to go here? Because normally, I think for the most part, and I don't want to speak out of turn here because it's different strategies for different people, but the Scotty Miller tier of players for the most part gets overlooked. But on SuperDraft, he's going to be a pretty hefty multiplier. Where did he go? A 3.3x multiplier in the captain spot for, let's see, McCole Hardman. He gets to a 3x multiplier from the captain spot. Are these guys viable as captain plays, or are they more guys that you would mix in as filler in one of the flex spots?
So the one big difference with SuperDraft, I mean, we're talking a lot in showdown strategy about avoiding duplicated lineups because you don't want to split those prizes. There are two factors on SuperDraft that work a lot different. One is that the number of entries are a lot smaller, so that just means less dupes off the bat. But then the number of ways you can combine the players increase exponentially compared to DraftKings and FanDuel because you can pretty much pick any 5 players. So that devalues the bottom end of the range a lot. Guys like Scotty Miller or Tyler Johnson that aren't going to see the field very much. I think you can stick to mostly the guys who are going to be on the field most of the game, or like a kicker, for instance. I think kind of limiting it to the guys that are going to average maybe 8 or 9 points at least as a base, or maybe that's a little too high. But guys who have a solid expectation, you don't have to go beyond those. You don't have to go to like the deep flyers on SuperDraft.
So then you mentioned the kickers here, and that's one thing we can touch on too, because kicker is always a controversial topic that I know you've extolled the virtues of in some of the single game formats for the other sites in the past year. And we do have a Harrison Butker, a 2.25x multiplier, Ryan Succop, a 2.3x multiplier when they're in that spot. How are you feeling about those guys as plays? Like, are they going to be better plays for you? And that's at the regular spot too. At a captain spot, they'd be a 3.4x for Butker and Succop a 3.45x. Are these guys more in play for you than usual because of the increased multiplier here, where I know you've talked a lot about how they normally have one of the steadier floors in terms of their median projection. And, you can sort of, I think in a lot of these showdown slates, you can put them in for, 10 fantasy points and have them a better chance of getting there rather than, some of those $100 guys, $200 guys that people always like to throw in and probably end up wasting a little bit of ownership on. Does Butker and Succop get more appealing to you on SuperDraft? I presume more in a flex spot than a captain spot.
For sure. Yeah. I think that people hate rostering the kickers when they could roster like a star player instead. So in my projections with the multiplier included, I have Harrison Butker projected for more fantasy points than Leonard Fournette and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I have a feeling a lot less people are going to be stoked about throwing Butker in their lineup than those guys. So I have a feeling the kickers are going to be pretty low owned. The nice thing about kickers in football is when a field goal kick happens, that means a touchdown didn't happen. So that means that drive was less productive from a fantasy scoring standpoint to other players. So the kickers tend to perform well when there aren't a lot of touchdowns in a game. And you don't necessarily need to put up a huge fantasy score in those games to have the best possible lineup. So I'm definitely, when I'm picking a kicker, I'm targeting a game that's a little less exciting.
So the same token, one thing, and you also, I'm curious your thoughts on this kind of holistically, but for me, one thing that I've done during showdowns this year, which has been helpful, I think, I had a pretty good showdown run this year and had a couple of the expected first place chops with all of my friends there splitting the money in some of the tournaments. But I think one thing that's been helpful for me is sort of dialing down to the construction, figuring out, the correlations and all of that. And one thing that's been helpful is not playing one kicker max, playing one defense max has been something that's sort of made my lineups have the normal story that we try to tell here, even when I'm optimizing a large batch. Are you more willing to go to 2 kickers because of the fact that the kicker multiplier is so high for these guys now, or is it still mostly where you're expecting them to not rise together because of the fact that they do tend to draw from each other?
Yeah, I think you can go to both kickers. It's not something I'd be real stoked about doing, but the multiplier factor definitely works in their favor on SuperDraft because the big knock against the kickers in regular format is that you can only get a maximum of 5 points per play. And those 50-yard plus field goals are pretty uncommon. So you're really talking 3 to 4 per, and that's like on a good drive. So the fact that they have a 2.3 multiplier, that means you're getting like 7 points per field goal to 9. And that really ups the upside of the kicker.
Okay, so yeah, so definitely an interesting thing to keep in mind here with the kickers, and as Alex mentioned, with his projections, which we have, which are available as part of that NFL Express package. I think it's just $3.95. I have that, don't have that data in front of me right now, but a very cheap deal here for the NFL Express package, which will get you the Super Draft projections, as well as all of our other data for the Super Bowl slate coming up across all the other sites. So make sure you go to awesemo.com/join and see what we have available on there. The defenses, Alex, are you inclined to play defenses more? Because the kickers, I think, do immediately jump up as being a little higher projection, but actually, are defenses even in play at all in SuperDraft? Now, this is something I'm learning as we go.
Yeah, I wish, man, because I love the defense and special teams, but I know a lot of players don't, so I can't hate that they left it out of the player pool here.
That was obviously me just setting you up for this prompt. To point it out. It's funny because like I had done my prep yesterday to go through your projections and see where some of the guys are that I think appeal the most to me, and I was like, wait a minute, I didn't see a single defense, and I just thought I was the idiot, and apparently I'm still the idiot, no matter how that turned out. But SuperDraft, some big tournaments going on. Again, superdraft.io. Download SuperDraft, the App Store. Some of the other tournaments, Alex mentioned the Super Million big game for them, which is $300K to first and a $4,000 entry fee. So if you want a big ball on there, that's one way, and probably, I would say, a decent chance of getting some overlay in that one. But also the 100K Hail Mary is $20K to first. That's just a $4 entry. 100K Red Zone is $20K to first. That's a $20 entry. So lots of tournaments on there for you guys to get in, which honestly will probably have a good amount of overlay with 27,500 entries needed in the $4 one. That seems unlikely to get where they need to go. But, we'll see. But obviously playing over at SuperDraft for the most part, high chance of overlay for you guys. Let's get into the plays more specifically. In this game, Alex, it does seem like it's one where, at least on paper, the defenses really do give up a lot to the pass. Tampa Bay's defense, we remember earlier in the year, getting absolutely killed by Tyreek Hill. That's one spot that should see a lot of people owning Tyreek across the industry. Also on Kansas City's side, you have to assume Tampa Bay has a decent chance of trailing here with a high total game. It does seem like the passing work should be there. They've also been a very pass-heavy team all year long, both in terms of their touchdown production and their actual per-play production. So how are you handling this build overall, Alex, where pass catcher is always a positive for these showdown single game formats, but also, it's a game too where that's going to be the way everybody builds. So what's the one thing right away that could be a way to get different?
Yeah, I think everyone's going to target the passing game here because, when you think Kansas City and Tampa, they're both very pass heavy teams. I think both are top 5 in the pass rate. So the interesting thing about this matchup is Kansas City's strength is passing and Tampa Bay's strength is pass defense. Or I guess it's just defense as a whole, more run defense than pass defense, but still a strong defense. So that'll be an interesting matchup. I kind of tend to favor Kansas City in that one because they've been just exceptional passing the ball. Well, they're kind of a mediocre team at running the ball. And Tampa is really strong versus the run. So that does seem like it's kind of a downgrade to Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Darrell Williams. What are you making of the run game in Kansas City?
Well, I think the thing with Tampa Bay is that whenever you play a guy against Tampa Bay, for the most part, because everybody knows the run defense is good, you can sort of look at the most cursory numbers like the yardage per game, which is not one that, I think is always predictive, as you've talked about a lot throughout the year. But still, 81 rushing yards per game. I think people see that and they run away. But, and I think we've all seen during the playoffs, teams have had bad results. And Aaron Jones, I thought, was a very high owned, but should have been contrarian play going against Tampa Bay in the NFC title game. And we saw he didn't have the best results in that spot and then ended up kind of one of the bigger busts of the slate. So I think there's value in trying to get to an Edwards-Helaire, get to a Darrell Williams, who's these guys had basically a 50-50 split when Edwards-Helaire was back last game. I just think, getting to more than one seems like not a great option, but I'm curious your lean here because I think I would still favor Darrell Williams based on what we've seen so far, but I'm trying to see the multipliers here. I think are, let me just pull them up real fast. Edwards-Helaire, you have him projected a little bit better here with the 1.7x multiplier on him. Darrell, a 2.1x multiplier. So yeah, again, same thing here as the other sites. I think I would favor Darrell just because of him looking better and having the better multiplier. But do you have a lean between the two? If you really had to choose, though, obviously if you're playing a bunch of lineups, you're probably going to get a mix of both.
Yeah, I think this one's really tough because in the championship game, Darrell Williams saw, or is it Darrell? I always get confused there. Anyway, he saw 13 rushing attempts to Helaire's 6. And then in the pass game, Darrell Williams saw 30% of the routes, while Clyde Edwards-Helaire saw 48%. So it was interesting because they were leaning on Darrell Williams more in the run game and Clyde Edwards-Helaire more in the pass game. So that makes it tough. But going back to the whole season, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was always heavily featured in the games where he was active. And this past game was the first one coming off of a long injury. So I'm kind of thinking it'll swing more in Clyde Edwards-Helaire's favor, but that depends on how they're playing out in the field. Where if Darrell Williams is having a better day, it wouldn't be surprising at all to see him out on the field for most of the crunch time. So that one's tough. One thing I don't mind is maybe playing them both too, and just hoping that Kansas City absolutely dominates the game. And then like if they don't rush the ball a ton, but if they did get a big lead and then they're rushing the ball like 30 to 40 times, I think both of them could get there. So that would be one angle I might look at, but the chance of that happening seems a little bit low. So how do you handle like the game script? Do you like try to go for a blowout kind of win in some lineups and then a close game in others, or how do you build your lineups?
So for the most part, I'm grouping just, based sort of agnostically and hoping that it's sort of that the grouping process helps that go where, for me, I normally have a cap of, I think it's 2 skill position or 2 pass catchers plus the QB, and then can only get one of the running backs. And that's obviously, going to limit some of this we were talking about where if a team is ahead and you also have the 50-50 split, I'm probably not going to capture that, or at least, historically. But I think, with the multipliers, I could see getting there a little bit more. I think with the way that Tampa Bay passes, I think I would still not feel the most confident in 2 running backs getting there because I think they're still going to be able to put enough pressure where I don't think it's a spot where CEH and Darrell Williams both do, get a heavy volume enough, especially against this defense to get the results. So I think I would still be less inclined to play both, but yeah, I could see the logic in that. I just don't know that I guess that's one build that does sort of factor for a high Chiefs success rate, which I think is the most likely outcome here. And obviously Vegas does as well with the spread and all of that. But I think to me, it's still, I would want to get heavier on the pass catchers. And I guess that's the question I would have for you too. If you are going to play both running backs, then are you willing to go, or are you getting then like a Tyreek at captain? Because you're sort of assuming then that Tyreek or Kelsey puts it down in a major way, or I guess Mahomes as well. And then you're sort of expecting that the trickle down effect is that a CEH or a Darrell gets more touches as a result.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, if I'm playing both of them, I'm going to definitely have 4 Chiefs to 1 Tampa Bay Buck because we're really projecting a ton of Kansas City production in that case. So I think going to like Mahomes plus Kelsey or Mahomes plus Hill with the other spots makes a lot of sense. So I kind of like that thought there. And I do think now that I'm thinking this through a little bit more, like it's a tough matchup for the running backs in general. So like kind of thinking the chances of them both succeeding on a day maybe a little bit lower than I'm making it out to be here. So maybe I'm just getting a little bit optimistic.
I mean, that's the thing with the super draft positional flexibility where you can play anybody. So you do, I think there's a little bit of a temptation to get more creative in there. And that is sort of the appeal of super draft when we talk about it with the multiplier format where Alex mentioned it earlier, but you could play all the stars here, just getting a degraded multiplier on some of them. Guys like Patrick Mahomes going to be a 1x flat. So that's sort of the risk that you're taking there is that he can have a great day, but is as good as one guy getting a 1.3x or even a 2x multiplier on their spots. So that's sort of the difference there in super draft. One question that I have for you, Alex, and this is one that I think has been maybe a bit of an edge, but also a bit of a daunting thing for people jumping in on super draft is that the ownership isn't something that we figured out, that anybody out there has really figured out. So for a showdown or single game format where the ownership is so important, normally we're trying to figure out how to get, a little bit of a guy that's going to be lesser owned, but has a good projection on him. How are you accounting for that on super draft or are you accounting at all? Are you trying to play the best plays because the field isn't sharp enough for ownership to matter as much?
Yeah, since I haven't really done a ton of research on ownership, I'm just going to go into Fantasy Cruncher and run some crunches and just hope that it at least resembles the way people are building lineups. I'm kind of thinking, I'd be interested to hear your intuition here that people are going to gravitate a lot to the star players, like especially hand builders, where I think Mahomes, Brady, Kelsey, Hill, Evans, Godwin, and Antonio Brown, and to a lesser extent Fournette and Allaire are all going to be really high owned. Everyone else, I don't think people are going to click. So I think like the kickers are going to be super low owned, except in my lineups, of course. Guys like Gronk, I guess Gronk has a little bit of name value, but the thing is, like, a lot of the guys that aren't as big names, like, they're not very likely to succeed either. So I would think Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill are the most popular players on the slate. What do you think?
Yeah, I think to me that seems like I would say an obvious one to take away that because of the fact that Tampa Bay's pass defense is so bad. And I think that's something too that we sort of have seen some inhibitors too in the playoffs, but overall, Tampa Bay giving up 250 passing yards a game. And I think if you look on a per matchup basis, these guys, that I have shadowing players, like Carlton Davis was shadowing some guys during the playoffs. It's just yards per route covered is terrible. Sean Murphy Bunting is going to be seeing a lot of Tyreek Hill. He gives up 1.4 yards per route covered. So I think this is one spot where like these guys are going to be chalky, but it's well deserved. So my inclination is to try to get different by getting a kicker in or getting, I think a McCole Hardman is one that really jumps out to me, knowing that he's going to see less ownership, probably less interest because of Sammy Watkins potentially being back in the mix, but he's still, a game breaker type guy at a 3x multiplier. And I think getting one guy like that in there would be the approach that seems the most optimal to me, is just getting different in one spot, because I think this is really a slate where the chalk could easily put distance like immediately because of the matchup.
Definitely. The thing that scares me about some of the guys that aren't chalky is that Sammy Watkins is back this week and Antonio Brown is back. So that's going to reduce the playing time of a lot of the guys that may be rotational players, potentially. I mean, there's a chance that Watkins isn't 100%, but when he does play, he tends to run routes on about 3/4 of plays. Those are directly coming from Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, and Pringle. So I'm a little less optimistic about the other pass catchers in Kansas City, based on like this idea that Watkins is fully healthy. So maybe Watkins would be my sleeper pick. You got to scroll down pretty far to find him. He's below guys like Gronk, the kickers, just based on the multiplier. So maybe that would be my sleeper pick.
Are you interested in, I guess let's talk about some of these Chiefs secondary pass catchers, because I think you're right there that maybe there's a bit of a squeeze, but we still see, guys like Demarcus Robinson getting a decent projection with the 2.45x. Hardman, a decent multiplier on him as well. Looks pretty good. The 2x on him. Are these guys ones that you would get even a little bit of then if you're worried about them getting squeezed? And I guess do you have a lean between them if you're going to play any? Because I think my lean would still be Hardman, though I do see that we have Demarcus Robinson projected a little bit better. Hardman, I just feel like, just him being sort of a gadgety player, those are the kind of guys that have like one or two big plays in a Super Bowl. And I think that does appeal to me. But just relative to exposures, Alex, how much of these guys do you think you would want, and obviously a very general ballpark way of looking at it?
Yeah, I think Hardman, he's always a interesting guy in fantasy because he has that big play upside, like you're saying. He gets targeted a lot more than DeMarcus Robinson when he's out on the field. Hardman's been targeted on 17% of routes, where Robinson has been targeted on 11%, which is a pretty low mark. But Robinson's playing time over the season has been better. On the season, he's ran routes on 71% of plays, while Hardman's ran routes on 50%. So that's kind of the trade-off. I think that they're very close, and Hardman's a much more popular player because of his big play potential. So I wouldn't mind taking some shots on Robinson, just hoping he can find his way into the end zone, even though he's not a big fantasy upside player.
So one question that I would have here, and this is sort of a general lineup build question, but because of the fact that you can play these guys and it's not going to completely construct your salary like it will on some of the other single game formats, do you foresee yourself having a vast majority of lineups with both Brady and Mahomes because of the fact that a high total game here, really a chance to be the highest scoring Super Bowl ever? I think the highest total is 57, if I'm remembering correctly, and we do have the 55.5 over under here. So to me, it seems like a spot where it's going to be tough to do that on DraftKings, on FanDuel to get these guys in. But on SuperDraft, even if you're not putting them at captain, I would think that getting Mahomes and Brady a lot seems like the best option here, just even with the cheaper multiplier, the lower multipliers on these guys. But is that a build that feels like a trap to you, or is that one that seems sort of obvious? Because it seems to me obvious, but sometimes the obvious path, as we know in DFS, can be the one that is going to eat up a lot of the field right away.
I'm kind of tempted to steer clear of Brady and Mahomes in the captain spot on SuperDraft because you have Kelsey with a 1.3 multiplier and Hill with a 1.4 multiplier, while Mahomes is at 1. And I mean, the tricky part is like the projections all look the same, but the volatility on Kelsey and Hill is going to be higher because of that multiplier. So I feel like if Mahomes puts up a big score, one of those two will have a huge game too and probably be higher scoring than Mahomes with the multiplier. The same logic kind of applies to Brady, where Godwin has a 1.65 multiplier to his 1.2. Evans is at 1.55 and AB is at 2. So I think there's a very good chance that the receivers outscore the quarterbacks here. But to one of your questions, I think putting Mahomes and Brady in the flex in the same lineup could be a pretty good strategy if you want to play all pass catchers in the rest of the spots.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that's definitely one of the ways to make the correlations that we talked about earlier. And I guess to kind of close the loop here, we need to talk more about the Tampa Bay side, though. Obviously, we got another half hour here, so we can talk about whatever we want here thanks to SuperDraft. And make sure you're playing on SuperDraft.io or download SuperDraft, the App Store. Promo code Awesemo21 will get you a $50 deposit match if you deposit $50. So do that. Easy way to get super cash right away, and you can play it immediately. Just enters your account and then play in some of these tournaments here. They got a ton of money up for grabs, even if you're not playing the Super Million Big Game, which is the big one, a $4,000 entry fee, but $300K to first, and decent chance of some overlay in that one. So if you are a big baller, feel free to take that one, or take some of their other more achievable tournaments like the 100K Hail Mary, just $20K to first, $4 entry. I think that's one that seems the most appealing to me for a bankroll. But follow your heart here, play on superdraft.io or download and tune in later today on the Live Before Lock show, because we'll be doing a little giveaway, I guess, or giving details on a giveaway of 100,000 Caesars Rewards credits to one lucky winner. That's a $1,000 value you can spend anywhere in the Caesars Empire, which is 50 plus properties and countless restaurants, partners, and more. And Alex, I know you were very intrigued by the rewards credits here, maybe trying to siphon some away for yourself, because there are some spots here that I know you enjoy. So feel free to give a plug to your favorite Caesars Rewards establishment.
For sure. So I didn't know this, but the casino I always go to in the Chicago area, the Horseshoe in Hammond, Indiana, is a Caesars property. So I'm kind of scheming here. I'm like, if I can get enough Caesars Rewards points to take my fiance out to a nice dinner or something on the house, like maybe she'll be a little bit more keen on my DFS playing all day. So that's my underlying motive for collecting these Caesars Rewards points on SuperDraft.
Yeah, so play over on Super Draft. And again, the Caesars Rewards things is going to be really big for them, and they're trying to make sure to make it have some value for you guys right away. So pay attention to what they're doing on Super Draft because they are really going out of their way to make sure that things are looking good for you guys as players. So one thing that I think I'm just going to sort of try to put a bow on this this Kansas City side where it looks very appealing. We all know that. But I think to me, one thing that jumps out, the 1.4x multiplier for Tyreek at the traditional spot compared to 1.3x for Travis Kelce, along with the fact that we saw the bigger day for Tyreek earlier in the year. Obviously, the massive day that he had where basically had one of the best days of the year within one quarter. I think it's sort of a question here, Alex, where the field's going to be very heavy on Tyreek, I think, at the captain spots and at the flex spots. But is he the first guy you would look at to, I don't know about get away from, but maybe get less of, or just using a flex instead of the captain because of the fact that he's so obvious that I think that sort of cuts into his value immediately?
Yeah, Tyreek Hill, I mean, he kicks ass, but I do prefer Kelsey just a little bit. I feel like Tyreek Hill, the difference between them is that Kelsey, he catches more of his passes and he's targeted a little bit more. So that just makes him a more reliable fantasy option. But Tyreek has more of those flashy big plays. But my general sense is that Tyreek Hill busts a lot more than Kelsey. Is that kind of how you feel about the two?
So normally, yes, I do think that Kelsey's volume is a little more reliable, but the issue is that I just really don't believe in this Tampa Bay defense at all, especially the secondary. For me, I really don't believe that they can stop Tyreek, and that's sort of where the tough part of it comes, where we look at the data, we look at all that stuff, and that's always been part of my battle is like, hey, here's what I feel from watching all the games and paying attention and having followed the Chiefs and having followed the Bucs defense all year. So to me, I don't believe that they can stop Tyreek, but I agree, like on a conceptual level, that like it just seems like Tyreek is so obvious for if you pull up a box score. Like that's always the way I think about it is if there's a casual player playing, they pull the box score, they look at Tyreek Hill, they're going to immediately see, oh yeah, he had 60 fantasy points against the same team and during the season. So that's going to make him much more valuable. And that to me always makes me want to believe in Kelsey more, but I think it's still like, I would rather have Kelsey than at the captain spot, but still get Tyreek into flex.
Dude, I forgot that game was against the Bucs. That was one of the wildest games this year. Wasn't that like a fantasy record or something?
I don't know if it was a record, but I think it might have been a record for like within the first half because he had basically his entire day, and then they just like called him off in the second half where they, just really. I mean, he was also probably covered a little better. It did seem like they sent a little more his way, but it's still Tyreek, like, and with his speed, I don't know. I just think that to me, people will remember that day or they'll see that big day when just pulling up his page. And then as a result, that's going to lead to Tyreek being liked even more, even though I think he should be liked more. And that's where I think I would favor Kelsey, even though it's to me, not the better play, just on a pure, talent and opportunity basis.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm not weighing that point too heavily that he had a big day versus the Bucs, although that is encouraging for sure. So, I mean, you can't go wrong with Tyreek Hill. He's a fantastic player, but I don't think he's a lock at all in fantasy this week.
Yeah, so I think that's a fair way to look at it. And I know I'll have more lineups with Tyreek than not, but I do think, treating him maybe a little bit less valuable as a number one option might be the move. And, it's going to be tough, I think, on SuperDraft. The 1.4x or the 1.3x for Kelsey could be a difference maker in those lineups. So that's one. Any dart throws at all here, Alex? I know we sort of talked about the concept of dart throws not being as viable here, but I just feel like we have to cover it because people see the prop bets for the Anthony Shermans of the world, the Nick Kaisers, Byron Pringle, who I know you've enjoyed from time to time, who does get his random routes and does get a catch or two. These guys are normally not the most in play on a DraftKings or a FanDuel showdown, but on SuperDraft as well. I just want to get your final opinion here, your final take. Are these guys mostly out of play for you, if not entirely?
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't bring up Anthony Sherman because that's my lock button play of the week.
Those fullback dump offs and 1 yard carries will always get you going.
I think if I'm going to gamble on some guys like that, it might be in sportsbook because in fantasy, really the only way to get a big fantasy score is to have a lot of successful plays. And No, like just getting a touchdown on a fluke play doesn't get it done usually. You need like 4 catches and a touchdown or something like that. So that makes it hard. Like the dart throws I'd be going to might be like, I kind of like Sammy Watkins. He's got this questionable tag. But they've said he's playing this week, so I feel pretty optimistic that it's not coming down to the wire. He's got a really high multiplier, and I'm just kind of thinking that once people get to Scotty Miller, Chad Henne, Cameron Brate, OJ Howard, maybe they'll stop scrolling down and just kind of lock in their lineup. So I feel like maybe people don't scroll down far enough to get to Sammy Watkins, but do you think there's any chance he goes a little bit under the radar?
I think so. I mean, I think the fact that he has missed a few games, and that I think, you do have Hardman again jumping out to me with the multiplier, but Watkins certainly seems like a guy who, even if he's hurt, even if he's running a little bit less than he would normally, still seems like he should be in the mix. The 2.4x multiplier on him is that better than Hardman? Yeah, he's got a number better than Hardman. Like, I think I'm with you. I think that people will go to Hardman and kind of think like I do, like, oh, he's the gadget guy and it's Super Bowl. They're going to break out whatever play that Andy Reid has had in the back of his head for a while. But just Watkins being out there and dedication, maybe double teams. People in the YouTube chat right now talking about how it's tough to double team Tyreek, but it doesn't mean they won't try to send a safety over the top to keep Tyreek under some degree of control. And if that's the case, you could see Watkins find more room because, like, who are you going to worry about covering? You're going to worry about covering Tyreek. You're going to be worried about covering Kelsey. And Watkins could just get opportunity just by being out on the field with those two guys.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, Watkins he's an interesting character because he was at one point like a top talent wide receiver, but he just, because of all the injuries, never quite made it. But being on a team with Tyreek and Kelsey can't hurt. So I think that he's a very intriguing guy.
Yeah, and then for whatever it's worth for these matchups against cornerbacks, which I think, some people believe in, some people don't. And I think for the most part, we are on the side of not. But worth pointing out that according to PFF, Sammy Watkins seems likely to be covered by Carlton Davis, who is the guy that did not do a fantastic job covering a lot of guys throughout the playoffs, even though he's their shadow corner, which is one of the odder things in the league. Tampa Bay side, and guys, we appreciate I Hustle For It DFS setting into Super Chat. Thank you for doing that on this sponsored show. We appreciate it a bunch. And we also appreciate all you guys watching and talking in here, and people talking to Marcus Robinson back today. He's back, but I think, the expectation still, and I guess we could talk about this for a second. Robinson, you would think running still behind Watkins, right? Even with the weeks out, like Robinson and Hardman, I think even if they get a little bit of a boost in routes, it still would seem like Sammy should get a substantial amount more, right?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, we can go back to the last game where all of them played. So in games where they're all healthy, Watkins was seeing between 75 to 90% of plays on passing plays, and Robinson was in the 54 to 80% range. In this 4-game stretch I'm looking at, Hardman was between 33 and 45%. So the playing time was pretty clear that Robinson was number 3, Hardman was number 4, and Byron Pringle only saw a couple of snaps in each of those.
Yeah, so I think the expectation would be a heavy Watkins amount of time here, even if he is coming off the injury. Still seems like a decent or a very likely probability of him being very in the mix here. Probably more than people realize, especially with that multiplier on him. We've kind of nickel and dimed and cut all the slivers here of Kansas City, but let's talk Tampa Bay, Alex, because I think we need to dig into this side a bit more. And right away, what is your... Go ahead.
One more data point here.
Yes,
so this season, Watkins missed weeks 6 through 11. But then the game he came back, he played 74% of snaps. So that is an encouraging sign that if he's back, they're probably going to run him out there a good amount.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's actually a good analogy coming off the injury. And this is a Super Bowl too. So I think, maybe you could expect even a little bit more because of guys pushing themselves. Like Sammy Watkins doesn't have to worry about next week. He just has to worry about getting through this spot for Sunday. So we'll see how that goes. I'm curious your thoughts though about the Kansas City side, or the going against Kansas City's defense for the Tampa Bay side of the equation, because Mike Evans has really been the guy with the touchdown equity throughout the year. Chris Godwin, certainly a guy who can rack up targets, can also get some of the deep plays when Mike Evans is being well covered. For whatever it's worth, people who care about the defense, the Kansas City side expected to have L'Jarius Sneed back in, though that's one Who knows how that'll go over the weekend, but it does seem like that's the way blowing for their rookie, who's been a very big part of their defense. But overall, I think I would still favor Mike Evans here, and I'm going to pull up the multipliers again just to make sure. Mike Evans, to me, I think always the preferred play to Godwin throughout the year, and that could be a mistake overall, especially given the fact that you do have Godwin projected better with the 1.65x multiplier on him. But where are you leaning between the big two here for the Bucs in a spot that you'd have to expect they're going to get a lot of passing volume, whether they have the lead or not?
Yeah, it's tricky because Godwin on the year has been the better player, but Mike Evans, he seems like he has a nose for the end zone. And that's not anything that we shouldn't expect because Mike Evans is 6'5", while Godwin's 6'1". The extra height really does give you an advantage in the short yardage passes. So I think that evens the playing field a little bit, where I think it might be hard to really pick between them. I'm looking at some props here, and the sports book I'm looking at has Godwin at 77 and Evans at 63. But I do feel like the touchdown gap between them does kind of even that out. So I'm kind of left looking at them pretty equally. And then Godwin has a little bit higher of a multiplier. And that might be the difference maker where I'd lean a little bit to Godwin.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And, Mike Evans, the touchdowns have been there, and he's getting throughout the year had 2.6 red zone targets to 1.5 for Godwin, 0.9 end zone targets per game to 0.5 for Godwin. So it's not a gigantic edge. And I do think that with the multiplier and with Godwin's ability to rack up more targets, they're both very strong plays. And I think it's a matter of you have to have a mix of both, I think, is really the main thing. If you're putting in multiple lineups, I think that, getting close to even shares seems like the move, because Tom Brady's going to throw to whoever's open. I think it's going to depend a lot on that Kansas City scheme on their side. We talked about Antonio Brown a lot, and for him, certainly a guy who has had some rapport with Tom Brady throughout the year, 2x multiplier on him. And I guess I'll ask you the first question here. Godwin, Evans, obviously in play at captain with their multipliers, with the fact that wide receivers do tend to be more volatile and have that upside for that captain spot. But are you willing to go to Antonio Brown as captain coming off the injury? Also, some not great media headlines about him. Not that matters for him, given that he continues to thrive relative to that, even when he leans in on all of his victim stuff. He's still in the mix heavily, and I guess going to be out there. So is he in play for you at captain, or is he more of a flex guy?
I mean, I like Antonio Brown, a captain, I guess. We got to talk about how he's going up against his former teammate, Le'Veon Bell. So we got a little bit of an interesting dynamic there. I think maybe Antonio Brown will try a little bit harder. No, I'm just joking around. But the one thing about Antonio Brown is his playing time hasn't been that great. He's been on the field between like 60 and 70% of the time in most games. And the one thing that makes up for it is he's targeted at a higher rate when he's on the field than Evans and Godwin. And that's kind of the intriguing dynamic, where if he plays a little bit more than we're expecting, I think he's more effective on a per play basis. And that gives you a little bit more variance than Evans and Godwin, who are out there every single play, and there's no upside for them to play more.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. And the multiplier on Brown seems worthwhile. And, I find it hard to believe he has the ceiling of the other guys, even, coming off of a knee injury too. There's enough things there that would push me a little bit away from Brown and more towards Evans and Godwin. But, I think there's room for Brown in the flex. And certainly, as we talked about earlier, the Scotty Millers of the world, the Tyler Johnsons of the world, probably not going to be viable now with Brown. And you would think too, right, Alex, that Brown mostly squeezes those guys out of the rotation for the most part, even with the knee injury. Like, I just find it hard to believe that Brown is not going to push it to the limit here. A vintage Super Bowl that we could reference here, or big game even that we could reference with Terrell Owens, that I feel like these guys here playing in the Super Bowl, getting that shot, they're willing to go out there even if their limbs are dangling. And I think that, to me, would be Antonio Brown as well.
Definitely. Unless he's inactive, I'm probably not going to look at Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson. So the way it shook out last week, Scotty Miller played half of the snaps. Tyler Johnson played 30%. But then if you go back just a week before to when Antonio Brown was in, they were both at 20%. So the chance that they both get there if Brown is active is very low.
What about the tight ends here? Because people are curious about Gronk at a captain spot here. And let me just check Gronk's captain multiplier because that is not in front of me. His captain multiplier is 3.45x. He's been a guy who has been, I guess, mostly a blocker throughout the playoffs. We've seen Cameron Brate have some upside in his spot. Do you think it'd be a situation where you'd be willing to go back to Gronk in this Super Bowl, given that we're in this big game? See, I don't even know. Can we say Super Bowl for the actual game talk, or is it only, it's only for ad reads we have to say big game, right?
I didn't get the memo, man.
So whatever, I'm going to go it interchangeably here for the rest of it. But we have seen Cameron Brate have more pass game work than Gronk. Gronk being used for his blocking ability a lot so far. And the Chiefs, not a great pressure team by any stretch, but still, 24% pressure rate for them. You would think maybe Gronk is needed to block a bit more. Are you willing to go to Gronk or Brate as a captain, just, to have one way of getting different? And Gronk, especially given the downturn we've seen.
Well, I think that Gronk and Brate are in play. I have them as far as projection at about 2/3 of the top players, are about 60%. So that's kind of the fringe of playable. The one thing about Gronk is I feel like he's always a little bit higher owned than he should be, just because he's got that name brand. And I have to admit, I mean, I'm kind of a Gronk fan, especially after his appearance as the White Tiger on The Masked Singer. But in DFS, I'm not really on him this week, I think, because I just feel like your average guy is going to be a little bit excited to play him.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly you can look at the results so far throughout the playoffs and, Brate running more routes, Brate getting more targets. Like, I think the wind is blowing towards Brate again. But, certainly, and I agree, like the casual interest here, I guess, is that the only guy, Alex, that you would feel like gets a downgrade because of the casual interest? I think Gronk, with the pedigree, with the name value, even people in the chat here, very much chiming up about Gronk. But I agree with you. Like, I think if we're looking purely at casual player narratives, I would worry that Gronk's a bit overowned because of that reason. So is he one guy? And is there anybody else who kind of fits that criteria for you?
So one encouraging thing about Gronk is the last game, he ran routes on 60% of plays to Brate's 34%. So that was just one more data point that kind of established that there's a good chance he's going to be out there a good amount. But I just don't think his results this year have been particularly excellent. He's run routes on 60% of plays, which is about average for a tight end, been targeted on 18% of those. So it's just basically like a worse version of Antonio Brown, who's running routes on the same number of plays but being targeted way more. So on a slate where we don't have to really go out of our way to get a tight end, he's not going to be a very big priority for me.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, Brate. I didn't realize only ran 12 routes in the AFC title game compared to 23 for Gronk. The targets, though, 5-1. So is Brate somebody that would jump out to you as a potential fade here because of the fact that the routes have been did come down for him there? And maybe that's something that people, myself included, just I think I might have seen this and just forgot about it and then just went like, yeah, Brate, he's the one running all the routes. But I do think that's one play here where, based on the volume and Brown coming back, Brate to me would be one guy, decent multiplier on him on SuperDraft, but I really don't feel like Brate is going to have the same opportunity he's had. And that would worry me about Brate, because I think people may, again, chase that box score and some of the results he's had and the narrative that I just mentioned.
Yeah, it was only one game, but it wasn't anything surprising because earlier in the year, I mean, he wasn't playing that much. It was really the last 3 weeks before the conference championship that he had been running a lot more routes. So I think we got to just go back to our priors that Brate is kind of a very deep flyer in fantasy at this point.
Yeah, so definitely one thing to keep in mind here, and maybe a bit of fool's gold for some of the people out there. There was one chat here which I wanted to, and I like how no one is on Tyler Johnson when Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Brown are all made of glass and injury prone, says David in the YouTube chat, spinning some narratives, spinning with that. Are you, how do you feel about takes like this one? And does that make you less inclined to get any Tyler Johnson or Scotty Miller? Because, I mean, Scotty Miller, I think there's a slightly better case for, but still really two guys who are very flimsy, especially on SuperDraft. Are you willing to mostly to go an entire fade of those guys just because of the fact that, people aren't, I know people are maybe a little more into them than they probably should be. And especially the narratives like that one where every player is going to get injured and Tyler Johnson has a massive day.
So in the NFL, the probability that a player gets injured is on average about 4%. I mean, if there's some guy that like maybe there's some sort of lingering injury, that there could be a higher percent chance, but I don't really see that here. So I don't think it's a significant enough chance because you got to hit the parlay that the injury happens and then the guy that isn't very good like has a huge day. So that combination of events isn't really something I'm going to be planning for. I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope that all the guys that we're expecting to play about the amount we're expecting. And I don't really think Scotty Miller or Tyler Johnson are in play because like even if one of the receivers is injured, they still have a timeshare. So it's just not a very good fantasy situation.
Got about 3 minutes left in the show here, and we'll give our final takes, and let's give a fade of the Super Draft slate too. But make sure you guys get the good plug in for Super Draft because look, they are somebody that Ricky over there has been a guy that it really been fantastic to us and been very kind to me too behind the scenes, and somebody who's really done a good job helping with this Super Draft team, get you guys better deals, get you guys better prize pools, get you guys more money. And the Caesars Rewards deal that they have now should put even more of that into the ecosystem. They have gigantic tournaments. We talked about them earlier. A decent chance of these ones overlaying, but if you have $4,000 laying around and you want to enter the Super Million big game, the decent chance of that overlaying with $300K to first and only 267 entries in that one. The Hail Mary, though, if you're a person who just wants to spend a normal amount of money and doesn't want to throw $4,000 in, $4 entries in the Hail Mary, 100K guaranteed prize pool, 20K to first. They also have their Red Zone, which is 100K, $20 entry, also with 20K to first and a smaller field on that one. But lots of great deals for you guys over at superdraft.io, or if you download SuperDraft in the App Store. So use that promo code Awesemo21. Get the free money for yourself. They'll deposit match up to $50. So put in $50 to give you $50 in super cash right away. And that's going to be money that you can play immediately and probably have a decent chance at cashing and winning some more back for yourself with their contest this weekend for the big game. So make sure that you are playing over at superdraft.io as we get messages about a betting show. This Apple notifications are killing me here. I don't need to know right now. But go check that out. We got 1 minute here, Alex. So let's give your fade of the Super Bowl on SuperDraft, obviously. So on DK, on FanDuel, they can't hold you to the fire here. But who is your fade of SuperDraft?
I would say maybe my fade would be Gronk, just because I feel like he's got that name value, and I don't think he's that great at fantasy player. My pivot would be going to one of the kickers because I feel like no one loves playing a kicker, but then you throw in the multiplier and they're a lot more intriguing and enticing. So I'm kind of feeling the kickers and hoping that maybe the game isn't as exciting as we're hoping. So who's your fade?
I think for me, based on what we talked about, I'm kind of talking myself into Cameron Brate. I think that people may chase him a little bit more, and I still think okay to get a little bit in the flex. But for me, just looking at the results, looking at what we've seen, and Brown coming in to squeeze him even more, I think he's one guy that I would have some concern going off in a meaningful way here. Last plug: go to superdraft.io, download SuperDraft to the App Store. Promo code's Awesemo21. Alex, what are the plugs for you? What shows do you have coming up for our final stretch here before the big game?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we have our live before lock coverage, and then I'm a little bit day to day with the schedule. So
I think you're on the Lofty Ben show, the usual Sunday show, okay, I believe.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about all the ins and outs of the game, breaking down all the players, and we got a lot of other football shows we've been doing this week. So it should be a good one.
Yeah, Alex is going to have some great takes on that show. I believe we have 3 hours of content for the big game on Sunday, where it'll be, I believe, Greg and Kyle starting, then Ben, Laffy, and Alex doing the usual deeper dive show. Then I think it's me and Josh taking you down to the home stretch. So watch that and tune in later today. NBA, it'll be me and Terry McBride doing another half hour for Super Draft NBA. So if you are a Super Draft stan, have no fear that we're going to have a lot of content for you guys. Make sure to check out the NFL Express packages at awesemo.com/join, where you can get all the NFL data here for just the big game for the Super Bowl for just a few bucks. So make sure to get in on that at awesemo.com/join. And we'll be back with you guys again very soon. So thanks for watching and play on Super Draft. Bye, guys.